Hello, bounty hunters. Has your bounty poster asked you to connect your app to Slack and you're scratching your head and wondering, well, just how do I do that? Well, this tutorial is for you. We're going to learn how to use the Slack API, some basic back and forth, and how to connect it to one of our AI apps we've built previously. Let's get started. So if you've not used Slack before, you will need an account. Slack is essentially business Discord, so keep that in your head when you're building anything. And once you've got an account, what we need to do is create a workspace. Once logged in, you'll be able to create another workspace and hit create a workspace. Give it a name. Now mine's a testing account, so I'm just going to call it test Slack workspace. I'm not going to invite anybody because I just want to test it with me. I'm going to put something my team's working on to create a random channel. Now once we're in, this is the Slack interface. As you can see, it is essentially a very, very straightforward text chat app. Now let's get into the Slack API so we can connect our bot to it. First thing we're going to need to do is create an app. We're going to make one from scratch. We're going to give it a sensible name and pick the workspace it's going to be deployed into. Now, this will be the workspace you have access to. Click Create App and we're well on our way. We're going to start by setting up a few permissions that the bot needs. We're going to go to OAuth and permissions and scroll down until we find the option that gives us the bot token scopes. We're going to add some scopes as just for the real basics. We're going to add chat right. We're going to add app mentions read, channels read, and groups read. With that done, we're going to go back to basic information and ask it to install it to the workspace. We're going to allow it, and then going back to the Slack app, you'll see that the bot has been added as an app. We also want to add the bot to the channel we're in. So go to General, right click and view channel details, click integrations, click add an app and pick your example bot. This will put it in the channel so it's sat there ready to receive messages. Let's get on with the nitty gritty. Let's start a new Python REPL. First thing I'm going to do is add the secrets. We're going to go back to OAuth and permissions and get the OAuth token, which we're going to put into our secrets as Slackbot token. While I'm here, I'm also going to go into packages and install the Slack SDK package. Now, first thing to do is import all the libraries we need. We're going to import the Slack SDK as Slack, import OS so we can access those environmental variables, import Flask because we're going to turn this into a web server, and we're also going to add Slack event adapter. Now you will need to go and install that as a package. It's not going to work straight from the import, but that's a couple of seconds job. So we also need the signing secret. I'm going to bring that in as Slack signing secret. And we've got two secrets that we need to connect to Slack. Our first line is just to initialize the Flask app. And we're going to create an event adapter where we're going to send it the Slack signing token. We're going to tell it that Slack/events is where it's going to go and the app is what matters. Now, this line here is actually really, really important. This is the bit that sets up the callback. In a moment, we'll be looking at how events are handled in Slack. But without this callback, we can't validate the bot being an authorized user. We're going to create a client as well, which is slack.web client. We're going to take for this one the Slack bot token that allows us to actually connect. And I'm going to create a variable called bot now. And all that's going to do is use the auth test function to extract the user ID of the bot. This will help us look for messages that are directed to the bot in an easy way later on. So if that runs and nothing goes wrong, we're good to go. I'm also going to add the app run. Remember that on Replit, we need to host it on 0000. I'm also going to put debug mode on, which rebuilds the Flask app as I'm typing the code. This is quite handy for development, but do not leave it on for production because it causes some serious security loopholes. Our next job is to go to event subscriptions in the Slack API and pop in our request URL. Now, if you go back to your web view, you'll see a website address in there. Copy that. That's the first part. Then it's /slack/events. Give it a second and it'll verify it. And then we're going to scroll down a little bit and subscribe to a few events. We're going to subscribe to app mention and message.channels. Now, because message.channels requires a few more permissions than we've given it, it'll ask us at the top if we want to reinstall the app. So go ahead and do that. That puts the new version in your workspace. And we're in a good place now. We've connected the app up and we've authorized it. And Slack can also go back and check that it's allowed to be accessing it through that /Slack/events web interface. Let's deal with what happens on an event. We know that the format for this is very similar to stuff we've seen before. I'm going to go for @eventadapter.on, and that allows us to define an event, and the event we care about message. So this is when any message is seen by the Slack bot. Now, of course, you can go through the API documentation if you like and see different events to capture different things, and this would work in the same way. Now, after the @event descriptor, we're going to do a def, and this is the function that's actually going to happen. Now, what I'm going to do here is call it onMessage and put the variable message as an argument. This will mean that I can actually access the text of the message that I receive. I'm also going to print it out. So if I go to my Slack app and I say hi there, then you'll see that I've got a big chunk of JSON that has been picked up by my event handler. Let's see if we can extract some of the more important bits of information from this event. So I'm going to start by creating a variable for event, which is just going to store that data. I'm then going to pull in the channel ID, as well as the user ID and the actual text of the message. Run that again and pop over to Slack. If we say hello, all that's been extracted, but we're not actually doing anything with it yet. So let's do something. I'm just going to say if bot in text. So that means essentially if the bot's user ID is included in the text. Now, if we have a quick look at that text, you'll see that the bot's user ID is included at the @mention. Now that means that if the bot sees its ID within the text, it knows it's being addressed, and that means it can respond to a message. So if it is, I'm just going to print out for me at the moment to show this is working. And back in Slack, if I just give a general message, you'll see the bot just read the message and did nothing. But if I @mention the bot, you'll see that for me there in the code, which means something's being picked up. So honestly, we're most of the way there now, but we now need to integrate that with our original AI-based system. So let's go and load that up. Copy this code first though. I'm going to fork my example training program from one of the previous lessons, and I'm going to go back in there, re-add my OpenAI API key so I can still get that working, and let's just check it works, which it does. Brilliant. So we're going to scroll down to the bottom here where you'll remember we had the entire loop of the program, the bit that actually did the work, and I'm going to delete that. And in its place, I'm just going to paste in the code we just wrote. Now you'll see there an underline on import OS. That's because we already did that for the previous program, so I'm going to get rid of that line. But everything else is pretty good. You also see that I've got this function onMessage, which is a redefinition, so I'd used that function name before, so I'm just going to change that quickly. I'm going to call it onSlackMessage, and we're good. Both of them should work together. So I'm going to go a bit higher up in the code, and I'm going to create a dictionary for history. Now you might be thinking, why a dictionary? Well, the idea behind this is very, very simple, as I'm going to write in this comment here. What we're going to try and do is we're going to store as each key in the history the user ID of the user, and within that we're going to store a list, the history list like we used previously. You remember that history list was just a list of conversations from the user and the bot, so we could pass it to the bot and have some context. By making a dictionary, we can store a different list of history for each user, and that's going to be really, really powerful. Now, I'm not going to store this offline, I'm not going to cache it or save it, but if you want to do that, is save that history dictionary somewhere local. Okay, in this if statement now, if the message is directed at the bot, I'm just going to check to see if the user ID is in the history. If it isn't, I'm going to create that entry with a blank list in it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the onMessage function to send the text and the history to the AI. Now you remember we returned something from that, we returned the answer, so let's pick that up as a variable. Then I'm going to append the human's text to their individual history as well as the answer before using the client.api call with chat.postMessage to put a message back in the same channel. The way that happens is we use the same channel variable, we use the text set to answer. Now with that working, if we click run, you'll see a bit of an error. So what's happening here? Well, first of all, we have moved code to a different REPL and we haven't installed the packages. So let's go in and install those two packages, Slack SDK and Slack Events API. We also need to bring in our Slack tokens from the previous example, our Slack bot token and our Slack signing secret. With both of those in, the program should run. And if we head over and talk to the AI bot, it will shoot off to OpenAI, get the text back, and then pipe it through to Slack for us, as you can see there. And that's pretty cool. We've connected it up in a really usable way now for any real business. But that's not ideal. If I message this bot, it's just going to reply with the answer to everyone. So let's reply to the thread instead. Now this is where it's a little different to Slack because replies are hidden and nested rather than in just the general feed. But it's really easy to sort out. In order to reply to a message, we need to have that message's individual ID. So I'm going to pull that out, ts equals event.getTS, that's the individual ID of the message. And then we just need to add that into the arguments for the post message. We're going to say thread underscore ts equals ts. And now when we run it again and we ask a question, it'll reply in the thread. And you can see there we even got 2 replies that time because it had a decent bit of text to send, which is pretty cool. So there you go. You've built Slack integration into your AI chatbot, making this the perfect business product. Of course, this idea is also very similar if you wanted to include a Discord integration, but if you want a bit more information on how to connect to Discord, I've got an amazing tutorial series on building a Discord bot on the Learn page. Good luck with your bounty hunting.